dive on KMR advice. Today, we're going to be tackling the autonomic nervous system, the ANS.
That's right. It's, fundamental stuff. Really the hidden manager running things behind the scenes. Heartbeat, breathing, digestion, all that.
Exactly. Stuff you don't think about, but it's crucial. And we're drawing on the resource, Autonomic Nervous System, Physiology, and Pharmacology to guide us.
Mm-hmm. And our goal here, especially for you medical students tuning into KMR Advice, is to break this down clearly. Think of this as a lecture discussion format.
Yeah, hopefully engaging too. We want you to really get these core ideas.
Definitely. And please, if you find this useful, share it with your colleagues, subscribe to KMR Advice. It helps us keep creating this content.
Absolutely. Okay,
Yep.
So setting the stage. The nervous system. Big picture. You got the central nervous system, right? Brain and spinal cord. The HQ.
Command center, yeah.
Then everything branching out from that. That's the peripheral nervous system, the PNS.
And within that PNS, you have two main parts. The somatic system, that's your voluntary muscle control, like deciding to move your arm.
And the star of our show today, the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, which is, well, autonomic, involuntary.
Precisely. It handles all those physiological processes that just happen without conscious thought. Heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, sweating, respiratory rate.
The body's autopilot system, basically,
Right.
keeping everything ticking over.
Exactly. It's constantly making adjustments to maintain, internal balance, homeostasis.
And this autopilot, it has two main modes, two branches that often work in opposition.
Right. The sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. It's like having a gas pedal and a brake.
Okay, let's hit the gas first. The sympathetic nervous system, this is the famous fight or flight response, isn't it?
That's the one. Think of it as the body's emergency response system. It kicks in when you perceive a threat or need intense physical activity.
So what does that actually look like physiologically?
Well, imagine that sudden stress. Your heart starts pounding, right? That's tachycardia, increased heart rate. The SNS is pushing more oxygenated blood out to your muscles, getting you ready.
Okay, faster heart rate.
And your airways. They open up, bronchodilation, lets you take in more oxygen. Again, fuel for action.
Makes sense. So prioritize the urgent stuff. What happens to things that aren't needed right that second, like digestion?
Good question. They get put on the back burner. The SNS inhibits gastrointestinal motility. No time to digest when you need to run or fight, right? Energy conservation for the immediate need.
Right, divert resources.
Your pupils also dilate, that's mydriasis, lets more light in, improves your visual awareness of the surroundings, and you need energy fast. So the liver gets stimulated to release glucose, glycogenolysis, quick fuel source dumped into the blood.
Wow, quite a cascade.
Oh, yeah. And one more key thing, vasoconstriction. Blood vessels in areas like the skin or digestive tract constrict, shunting blood towards the muscles and heart where it's needed more urgently.
So a whole body mobilization. How does this signal get sent to trigger all this? What's the chemical message?
Okay, neurotransmitters. The main player at the endpoint, the postganglionic neuron talking to the organ, is norepinephrine, NE. That's the workhorse messenger for most sympathetic targets.
Norepinephrine. Okay.
But there's also epinephrine, adrenaline. That gets released from the adrenal medulla, kind of like a specialized sympathetic ganglion directly into the bloodstream. So it acts more like a hormone, reinforcing the effects everywhere.
So NE is local, epi is widespread reinforcement.
Sort of, yeah. And importantly, at the first synapse, the preganglionic one in the SNS chain, that uses acetylcholine, HEA, acting on nicotinic receptors.
Okay, so HE kicks it off, then NE mostly takes over at the target.
Got it.
So that's fight or flight. Now, what about the brakes, the parasympathetic nervous system?
Right, the PNS. This is your rest and digest system. It's all about conserving energy, bringing things back down to baseline, handling the housekeeping tasks.
So logically, we'd expect the opposite effects of the sympathetic system.
Exactly. It counteracts the SNS actions. So instead of tachycardia, the PNS promotes bradycardia, slowing the heart rate down.
Lower heart rate.
Instead of bronchodilation, you get bronchoconstriction. Airways narrow slightly. You don't need maximum airflow when you're resting.
Right. And digestion?
And that gets stimulated, increased gastrointestinal motility, increased secretions, time to process nutrients. That's the digest part.
Cool. Pupils.
They constrict. Meiosis, better for close-up vision, reading, relaxing, and things like promoting bladder contraction for urination, general housekeeping, returning to equilibrium.
So what's the primary messenger for this rest and digest side?
It's primarily acetylcholine again, Aisha.
Oh, interesting. Same as the first step in the sympathetic.
Yes, ASIA acts on nicotinic receptors at the preganglionic synapse, just like in the SNS. But, and this is key at the postganglionic synapse, where the PNS neuron talks to the target organ, ASIA acts on muscarinic receptor.
Different receptor type at the target. Muscarinic for PNS, whereas SNS mostly uses NE at the target.
Exactly. That receptor difference is crucial for how the systems work and, importantly, how drugs can target them selectively.
Okay, that distinction is really important. So this leads us perfectly into looking closer at these neurotransmitters and their pharmacology. Let's start with acetylcholine, ACC, since it pops up in both systems.
Right. So, as we said, ACS is everywhere preganglionically. Both SNS and PNS use it at that first synapse onto nicotinic receptors. And then it's the main player postganglionically for the parasympathetic system, acting on those muscarinic receptors on heart muscle, smooth muscle, glands.
Which means pharmacologically, you can influence a lot by targeting ACH pathways.
Absolutely. You have cholinergic drugs. These mimic or boost AC effects. A classic example is pilocarpine. It's a muscarinic agonist, makes pupils constrict, helps drain fluid in the eye, used for glaucoma.
Okay, mimics AC. And the opposite, blocking AC.
Those are anticholinergic drugs. They block AC, usually at the muscarinic receptors. Atropine is a big one. We use it to treat bradycardia, slow heart rate, because blocking AC's effect on the heart lets the heart speed up.
Right, blocking the brake lets the gas have more influence.
Essentially, yes. Atropine is also an antidote for things like organophosphate poisoning, where you have way too much extra activity causing problems.
Got it. Okay, let's move to norepinephrine, NE, the main sympathetic postganglionic transmitter. What about its receptors?
NE works through adrenergic receptors, and these come in several flavors, broadly alpha and beta,
Alpha and beta.
and subtypes within those. Alpha-1 anortic receptors are often involved in smooth muscle contraction, think vasoconstriction, raising blood pressure, also pupil dilation. Alpha-2 were interesting. They're often presynaptic and actually inhibit further NE release, like a feedback brake.
Okay, ADA1 constricts, ADA-REND inhibits release. What about beta?
Beta receptors. Beta-1 are primarily in the heart. Stimulating them increases heart rate and contractility, how strongly the heart squeezes.
So beta-1 is heart focused.
Mostly, yes. Beta-2 receptors are found in places like the smooth muscle of the bronchioles. Stimulating them causes bronchodilation, opens the airways. They're also in blood vessels and skeletal muscle, causing vasodilation there, getting more blood to muscles.
Opposite effect of ABIC1 in some vessels then. Interesting.
Yep. And there's also beta-3, mainly involved in fat breakdown lipolysis in fat cells.
Wow. Okay, so these different subtypes, A1, A2, AE3, that explains why NE can do different things in different places and why drugs can be quite specific.
Exactly. That's the foundation of a lot of pharmacology here. Adrenergic agonists mimic NE or epinephrine, albuterol for asthma. That's a selective beat2 agonist. It targets the airways to cause bronchodilation with less effect on the heart's beta-1 receptors.
Targeted action.
Right. Or dobutamine, APR1 agonist, used sometimes in heart failure to boost contractility. Then you have the antagonists, the blockers, alpha blockers, beta blockers.
Like beta blockers for high blood pressure.
Precisely. Propranolol is a non-selective beta blocker. It hits both 1 and VO2, so it lowers heart rate and blood pressure, but can also affect airways because of the BAT2 block. Newer ones are more selective for Bodopo.
Fascinating how specific you can get. Now, you mentioned epinephrine earlier, released from the adrenal medulla. How's it different pharmacologically from NE?
The key difference is that epinephrine being released into the blood acts systemically, and it hits both alpha and beta receptors quite strongly. NE is more selective, particularly for alpha and beta-1.
So epi is kind of a broader, more potent activator.
In many ways, yes, which is why it's the go-to drug in emergencies like anaphylaxis, severe allergic reactions. Its alpha effects constrict blood vessels to raise pressure and reduce swelling, while its beta effects open airways and stimulate the heart, a real lifesaver.
Makes sense. Okay, one last one mentioned in the source. Serotonin, 5-HT. It's not quite as central to the direct SNSPNS actions we've been detailing, but worth a nod.
Yeah, definitely worth mentioning, especially for completeness. Serotonin is hugely important, but mostly in the central nervous system mood, sleep, appetite, and also significantly in the gut, the enteric nervous system.
So less direct ANS control, more CNS and gut.
Largely, yes. It has many, many receptor subtypes, making its pharmacology complex. Think SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors like fluoxetine for depression, they work in the brain. Or drugs like ondansetron, a 5-HT3 antagonist, used to block nausea and vomiting, often acting on receptors in the gut and brainstem.
So important systemically, pharmacologically relevant, but maybe less core to the immediate sympathetic parasympathetic push-pull we focused on.
Exactly. It interacts, but ANO, NE, and EPI are the main drivers of those immediate ANS responses.
Okay, great. So wrapping this up then, for everyone following on KMR advice, we've journeyed through the nervous system, homed in on the autonomic nervous system,
Looked at its two crucial branches, the sympathetic fight-or-flight system.
and the parasympathetic rest and digest system, that constant balancing act.
hmm And we dove into the key chemical messengers, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and touched on serotonin. Crucially, we looked at their receptors.
Nicotinic, muscarinic, alpha, beta.
Right. Understanding those receptors is absolutely fundamental for pharmacology, how drugs can mimic or block these natural signals to treat conditions.
And for all you medical students on KMR advise, getting these basics down, how the ANS works, the neurotransmitters, the receptors, how drugs play into this, it's just foundational. You'll use this constantly.
Absolutely. And it naturally leads you to ask, okay, what happens when this system goes wrong? Autonomic dysfunction, or how exactly does blocking a beta 1 receptor lower blood pressure in a patient? Deeper questions to build on this.
Definitely food for thought. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive on KMR advice.
Hope it was clear and helpful.
If you found this breakdown useful for your studies, please hit that like button, share it with your classmates, and definitely subscribe to KMR Advise for more medical insights like this.
We appreciate the support. See you next time.